You've probably felt it before, that quiet shift in the air when the closeness you once shared with someone you cared for suddenly starts to fade. It doesn't happen with slammed doors or dramatic exits. It begins in silence, in the moments when you sense something has changed, but you can't put your finger on what. That's the truth about why most relationships don't break apart with cheating, fights, or walking away. They first collapse on the inside, long before they collapse on the outside. And you've been told to watch for the obvious signs, the physical distance, the late replies, the cancelled plans. But what you were never taught to notice are the invisible cracks that form long before any of that ever happens. Think about it, the beginning feels electric, doesn't it? You're seen, you're heard, you're understood. You share inside jokes, late night talks, and you can't imagine a day when that connection will dim. But slowly, without even realizing it, the energy changes. Conversations grow shorter. The laughter doesn't come as easily. You start repeating the same routines, the same safe topics, avoiding the deeper truths. You look at each other, but you stop really seeing each other. And in those quiet shifts, emotional intimacy starts to die. That's the stage where relationships actually begin to fade. Not when someone physically leaves, but when they emotionally check out. And here's the part most people miss. When emotional closeness fades, everything else eventually follows. Arguments that once would have been small suddenly feel unbearable. Distance becomes easier than connection. Even physical intimacy starts to feel like a performance rather than a bond. And you, standing in the middle of it all, keep asking yourself, what went wrong? Was it me? Was it them? Why did something that once felt so alive start to feel so cold? The answer lies in how emotional neglect quietly sneaks in and rewires the relationship from the inside out. You see, emotional failure doesn't scream, it whispers. It hides in the "I'm fine" that you know isn't true. It lives in the way one of you starts scrolling through your phone instead of listening. It creeps into the pauses that stretch longer than they should, until silence feels safer than honesty. And the scariest part is, most people never notice it happening until it's already too late. They don't realize the absence of emotional nourishment is just as destructive as betrayal. They don't realize that a relationship doesn't need another person to come between you. It only needs neglect. But here's the real truth that nobody wants to admit. Relationships don't die from a lack of love. They die from a lack of connection. You can still care deeply for someone, but if you're not emotionally feeding each other, that love will starve. Think about it like this. Love is the seed, but connection is the water. Without water, no matter how beautiful the seed, it will never grow. And when you let the connection dry out, the entire foundation begins to crumble, even if you both still claim you love each other. And you know what makes this worse? Society trains you to focus on the physical side of relationships as the real marker of closeness. How often you're together, how much time you spend, even how active your sex life is. But none of that matters if the emotional core is already breaking down. You can spend every day with someone and still feel utterly alone if they no longer understand you, listen to you, or value your inner world. That's why so many people wake up one day lying next to someone they love, and yet feel like they're sleeping beside a stranger. But if you've been here, you know how heavy it feels. You know what it's like to wonder if you're too much or not enough. You know how frustrating it is to bring up your feelings only to be told you're overthinking. You know the ache of wanting to be close again but not knowing how to bridge the gap. And yet, that's exactly where the solution begins. Because once you can see that relationships fail emotionally before they fail physically, you gain the power to stop it from happening. You stop waiting for the visible signs and start paying attention to the invisible ones. You stop confusing being around each other with being connected to each other. And here's the shift that changes everything. Connection isn't about grand gestures. It's not about expensive gifts, constant physical presence, or proving your love in dramatic ways. It's about the daily moments that feed intimacy, listening without distraction, asking deeper questions, sharing your fears without shame, and holding space for your partner to do the same. It's about choosing curiosity over assumption, effort over autopilot, presence over routine. Because the truth is, if you want a relationship to survive long term, it's not passion alone that keeps it alive. it's emotional attentiveness. So when you think back to relationships that didn't last, you'll probably realize they didn't suddenly end. They eroded, piece by piece. The emotional bond weakened till there was nothing left to hold on to. And that's why it's so important to recognize this pattern before it destroys something that matters to you. Because the difference between couples who last and couples who fall apart isn't love, it's awareness. It's the ability to notice when emotional closeness is slipping and the courage to do something about it before it's too late. Now imagine for a moment you're in a relationship right now and you want it to last. You love this person. You don't want to end up as just another story of two people who cared but couldn't make it work. What do? You learn to see the invisible. You learn to notice the subtle changes that signal disconnection. You learn to invest in emotional intimacy the same way you invest in every other part of your life. Because when you get this right, everything else follows. The laughter returns. The conversations deepen. Even the physical intimacy strengthens because it's fueled by something real again. And maybe right now you're thinking about someone you lost, someone you wish you could have done things differently with. That regret is heavy, but it also proves something. You value connection more than you realized at the time. And if you take that lesson forward, you don't have to repeat the same mistake again. You can start rebuilding differently with yourself, with your current partner, or with someone new. Because once you understand that emotional closeness is the foundation of everything, you finally know where to put your energy. This is where the shift begins. Not with pointing fingers, not with waiting for the other person to change, but with a decision inside you that you will not let connection die quietly in your hands, that you will see the warning signs and respond, that you will not settle for a love that looks alive on the outside but is empty on the inside. Because the truth is, you deserve more than that. You deserve a relationship where you are deeply known, truly understood, and consistently valued. And the first step toward creating that is recognizing the pattern of emotional failure before it destroys everything else. Now that you've begun to see the pattern, the quiet erosion of emotional intimacy, you might be asking yourself, why does it happen so easily? Why do two people who once felt inseparable suddenly drift apart without any single dramatic event? The answer isn't complicated, but it is subtle. It lives in the small, everyday choices that seem harmless, but slowly, day by day, chip away at the bond between you. And here's the catch. Most of the time, neither of you even notices. Think about the way you communicate, or don't communicate. At first, every message, every call, every conversation felt important. You listened with intent, shared your thoughts freely, and responded with empathy. But over time, distractions creep in. Work, social media, responsibilities, stress, they become invisible walls between you. You think, I'm tired, they'll understand, or they'll figure it out eventually. And while your intentions might be innocent, the effect is powerful. Emotional distance grows. Where you thought everything was fine, you stop being fully present. You stop investing in the subtle, essential acts of connection that make someone feel truly seen. And then there's the silent assumption trap. You assume you already know your partner inside and out. So you stop asking questions that matter. You stop digging deeper into their fears, their dreams, their unspoken insecurities. You assume their love is constant, that it doesn't need nurturing. But connection doesn't work that way. Emotional intimacy isn't a set-it-and-forget-it achievement. It's an ongoing conversation, a daily choice to understand and be understood. When you stop, even for a few weeks or months, the loss accumulates quietly until it becomes the unspoken elephant in the room. Notice how easy it is to fall into avoidance. You argue less, not because the problems are gone, but because it feels safer to avoid conflict than risk vulnerability. You agree superficially, smile through tension, and tell yourself, it's fine. But inside, that silence speaks louder than words. Your partner feels it, and you feel it. You are both longing for something more, something real, yet neither of you wants to be the first to confront the discomfort. And in that hesitation, emotional intimacy starts to decay. The relationship becomes functional, polite, even comfortable, but the connection, the heart of it, is slipping away. And here's the moment most people never see coming. The anger and resentment that emerge later aren't the root cause. They are symptoms. They are proof that emotional needs have gone unmet for far too long. When you finally explode over something small, it isn't really about the incident itself, it's about the accumulation of countless little moments where your feelings were ignored, dismissed, or left unspoken. And when you reach that breaking point, it feels sudden and overwhelming, even though the process has been happening quietly for months, maybe years. You might recognize it in the way you start to stop sharing your thoughts. You used to confide freely, to be honest, even when it was uncomfortable. But now, you keep your opinions to yourself. You stop expressing frustration, excitement, or vulnerability because it doesn't seem to matter. You start to protect yourself by retreating emotionally, not realizing that this withdrawal is exactly what makes the disconnection grow stronger. You're not pushing them away maliciously, you're unconsciously creating safety for yourself in a relationship that feels unstable. But ironically, this self-protection fuels the emotional failure you feared in the first place. And it's not just about what's left unsaid, it's about what's done in place of real connection. The little distractions you allow become substitutes for intimacy. Scrolling through your phone instead of listening, spending time together physically but not emotionally, repeating surface-level conversations while avoiding the deeper truths that really matter. Every "I'm busy" or "not now" is like a drop of water that slowly erodes the foundation. Individually, these moments seem insignificant, but over time, they accumulate into a canyon that separates you from the person you care about. You might also notice a pattern in blame. When emotional failure becomes undeniable, it's easy to point fingers. You tell yourself they've changed or they don't care like they used to, while they might be saying the same thing about you. And the truth is, blame is seductive because it distracts you from the real problem, the slow decay of emotional investment that both of you contributed to. It isn't about fault, it's about awareness and willingness to repair what's breaking. And that awareness is rare because emotional erosion is invisible until the damage becomes undeniable. Here's the part that most people ignore. Emotional failure doesn't happen overnight because of external stress or conflict. It happens because of neglect, even when love is present. You might love them, care about them deeply, and still allow distance to grow between you. And that's why many couples are stunned when their relationship begins to fail physically, because they never realized it had already failed emotionally. You can still be in love and yet be emotionally disconnected. And the danger is that by the time physical issues appear, less intimacy, less touch, less closeness, you're already too far into the decay to reverse it without conscious effort. Think about the relationships you've seen around you, the friends, family, or colleagues whose partnerships ended unexpected. What you often don't see is the slow erosion that led up to it, the emotional disengagement, the avoidance, the small neglects, the unspoken frustrations that grew over time. What looks sudden from the outside is the result of months or years of invisible patterns. And once you understand this, you begin to recognize that the secret to preventing a collapse isn't in dramatic gestures or grand confrontations. It's in small, consistent acts of emotional attentiveness. And this is where most people get it wrong. They focus on fixing symptoms, not causes. They try to argue less, spend more time together, or reignite passion physically, hoping it will repair the underlying issues. But without addressing emotional neglect, those efforts are temporary. You can't patch a leak in the foundation by painting the wall. You have to see the decay, understand it, and actively rebuild what has been lost. And the sooner you begin, the more successful you will be. So now, it's time to ask yourself some hard questions. When was the last time you really listened without distraction? When was the last time you asked your partner something meaningful about their fears, dreams, or inner world? When was the last time you shared your own vulnerability and allowed them to hold it without judgment? If you can't answer these immediately, it doesn't mean it's too late. it means it's time to start. Emotional intimacy isn't something that magically returns on its own. It's something you must consciously nurture. And the powerful truth is, once you start paying attention, you'll notice the opportunities everywhere. The quiet moment after work, the shared joke, the text you send just to check in, the way you ask about their day with genuine curiosity. Each of these small acts is like water to a parched plant. They revive emotional closeness in ways you might have forgotten were possible. And when these moments are multiplied over days, weeks, and months, the emotional bond strengthens, creating a protective layer that keeps the relationship resilient against stress, distraction, or even disagreement. You might be thinking, it sounds simple, but is it really enough? The answer is yes, but only if it's consistent. Emotional intimacy doesn't rely on perfect timing or flawless execution. It relies on effort and presence. It's about showing up for your partner emotionally every single day, even when it feels inconvenient or uncomfortable. It's about choosing curiosity over assumption, listening over reacting, and connection over convenience. Because when you consistently invest emotionally, everything else, the laughter, the trust, the physical closeness, naturally follows. And here's the truth you need to hold on to. Emotional failure isn't inevitable. It doesn't have to be the path your relationship takes, but it requires awareness, courage, and commitment. You must be willing to see the warning signs, face the uncomfortable truths, and take active steps to repair the cracks before they widen. Because the difference between relationships that survive and those that collapse isn't luck, it's the conscious choice to protect and nurture emotional connection every single day. So look honestly at your relationship now. Listen to the silences, notice the conversations, pay attention to the subtle distance. Ask yourself, are you truly connected, or are you just existing together? Because the moment you identify emotional neglect, you gain power. The power to change the trajectory, to rebuild, and to prevent physical disconnection before it ever happens. The next step is understanding the exact behaviors and patterns that kill emotional closeness, and more importantly, how to reverse them. By now, you understand that emotional failure is subtle, cumulative, and devastating. But awareness alone isn't enough. You need to see the patterns, the red flags that signal emotional distance is growing, even when everything appears normal on the surface. You need to recognize the behaviors that accelerate disconnection, the habits that seem harmless but actually erode intimacy over time. Because the truth is, relationships don't fail suddenly. They fail through repeated choices, small neglects, and unnoticed withdrawal. Start by looking at communication. When did you last have a conversation where both of you felt fully heard? Truly heard, not just nodded at or tolerated. Emotional intimacy depends on this kind of active listening. And if you find that your conversations are mostly transactional, about logistics, schedules, or surface-level updates, you've already crossed a dangerous line. It's in the quality of your interactions, not the quantity, that connection survives. When you stop sharing meaningful thoughts, feelings, and fears, the emotional bridge between you begins to crumble. Notice also the subtle acts of withdrawal. When your partner stops initiating conversations, or you stop responding with curiosity, that's not just a minor annoyance, it's a warning sign. When laughter feels forced or moments together feel obligatory rather than enjoyable, the bond is weakening. You might rationalize these behaviors with excuses like, they've been busy, or I'm stressed, but the truth is repeated withdrawal creates distance that doesn't heal on its own. You can't wait for someone to come around while ignoring these patterns. They must be addressed intentionally. Then there's the creeping resentment that hides behind everyday frustration. It's easy to dismiss irritation as small annoyances, a forgotten promise, a careless word, a missed call. But when these moments accumulate without honest discussion, resentment builds silently. And once it grows, it poisons connection. You start interpreting neutral actions as attacks, reading criticism where none exists, and overreacting to small conflicts. Resentment isn't the cause of emotional failure, it's the symptom of long-term emotional neglect. Recognizing it early gives you the chance to address it before it takes over your relationship. Another critical warning sign is avoidance of vulnerability. Emotional intimacy thrives when both of you can share fears, insecurities, and desires without judgment. When either of you stops being vulnerable, walls go up, and true connection becomes impossible. You may notice a fear of opening up, a reluctance to express needs, or a habit of hiding feelings to avoid conflict. And while this might feel like protection, it's actually a form of emotional disengagement. The longer you avoid vulnerability, the harder it becomes to reconnect. You must also pay attention to patterns of unmet emotional needs. Relationships are reciprocal. Both partners have needs, and when these are ignored repeatedly, emotional failure accelerates. Are your feelings dismissed or minimized? Do you feel unappreciated, unseen, or unsupported? These are not minor grievances, they are signals that the emotional bond is weakening. And the most important insight here is this: emotional needs are never too much to ask for. Wanting connection, understanding, and validation is human, and a relationship cannot thrive if these basic needs go unacknowledged. The danger intensifies when avoidance, withdrawal, and unmet needs intersect. Suddenly, a relationship that once felt secure begins to feel fragile. You notice subtle changes. You start avoiding difficult topics, conversations feel tense or superficial, and physical intimacy begins to feel mechanical rather than meaningful. You might even wonder if love has disappeared, but it hasn't. The emotional foundation is just eroding quietly, leaving everything else unsupported. That's why most relationships fail emotionally before they fail physically, because physical connection alone cannot sustain love without the underlying emotional bond. And this is where most people stumble. They try to fix the relationship with surface-level solutions. They buy gifts, plan trips, or increase physical intimacy, hoping it will patch the emotional gaps. But these gestures, while well-intentioned, are temporary fixes. They don't address the underlying patterns that are quietly sabotaging connection. Without confronting withdrawal, avoidance, resentment, and unmet needs, the cracks keep widening. That's why emotional failure repeats itself even in relationships with genuine affection. It's not about effort, it's about focused, consistent repair of the emotional foundation. So what do you do when you recognize these patterns? The first step is to break the cycle of neglect. Start by prioritizing emotional presence over everything else. Notice when you are distracted, disengaged, or withdrawing, and make the conscious choice to connect instead. That means listening actively, asking meaningful questions, and being fully present even when it feels inconvenient. It means showing curiosity about your partner's inner world and sharing your own without fear. And it means understanding that emotional intimacy requires ongoing effort. It's a daily commitment, not a one-time gesture. Next, confront avoidance and vulnerability. Allow yourself to express feelings honestly, even when it feels uncomfortable. Encourage your partner to do the same. Acknowledge past neglect or distance openly, without blame, and express a genuine desire to rebuild connection. Vulnerability is contagious. When you take the first step, you create a safe space for the other person to follow. And when both of you practice this consistently, the emotional walls that were slowly isolating you begin to come down. Resentment must also be addressed directly. Identify the small irritations that have accumulated and talk about them calmly and constructively. Don't wait for them to explode into a fight, and don't bury them under silence. Speak about your needs, your frustrations, and your desires in a way that invites understanding, not conflict. When resentment is acknowledged and addressed, emotional intimacy can heal and grow stronger than before. Finally, focus on consistent emotional nourishment. Small gestures matter: checking in, expressing appreciation, laughing together, sharing fears and hopes, listening without judgment. These acts are not superficial. They are the core of emotional connection. You cannot overestimate the power of daily, meaningful engagement. Over time, these consistent efforts rebuild trust, closeness, and understanding, creating a protective emotional buffer that prevents the relationship from failing physically. The key insight here is simple but profound. Emotional intimacy is the foundation, not an accessory. Without it, love cannot survive long term, no matter how strong your feelings or how frequent your physical contact. Once you recognize the warning signs and patterns of emotional failure, and actively intervene with awareness, vulnerability, and consistent effort, you reclaim control over the trajectory of your relationship. You stop letting it decay quietly and start actively shaping its future. And imagine how different your life feels when you do this. When emotional connection is restored, arguments become easier to navigate, disagreements feel less threatening, and even the mundane moments gain meaning. Physical intimacy improves because it is no longer a replacement for emotional emptiness. It becomes an expression of genuine closeness. You experience love not as a fragile, fleeting feeling, but as a resilient, growing bond built on understanding, trust, and mutual emotional investment. Now ask yourself honestly, are you ready to do what it takes to stop emotional failure before it manifests physically? Because recognizing patterns, addressing withdrawal, nurturing vulnerability, and providing consistent emotional nourishment isn't optional, it's essential. The relationships that survive and thrive are those where both partners choose awareness, responsibility, and commitment to emotional closeness every single day. And when you commit to this, everything else, trust, laughter, passion, and even long-term stability, follows naturally. By now, you understand the invisible dangers, how emotional failure creeps in, how subtle neglect, avoidance, and unmet needs erode connection, and how resentment silently undermines love. But knowing this is only the beginning. Awareness alone doesn't repair what's broken. The next step is action, how to restore emotional intimacy, rebuild trust, and create a relationship where closeness is alive, resilient, and enduring. Start by reclaiming presence. Presence isn't just being physically near your partner, it's being fully engaged mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Notice when your mind drifts to work, distractions, or other worries while sitting together. Stop, turn your attention back to them. Listen, not just to respond, but to understand. Ask questions that go deeper than "how was your day?" Dive into feelings, dreams, insecurities, and even fears you haven't shared before. Emotional closeness grows not from surface chatter, but from the courage to truly know and be known. Next, practice radical honesty and vulnerability. This isn't about blaming or criticizing. It's about showing your authentic self. Share what you feel, even when it's uncomfortable. Admit when you feel disconnected, lonely, or misunderstood. Express desires you've held back, and invite your partner to do the same. Vulnerability is the glue that repairs emotional distance. It allows both of you to step out of defensive patterns and into understanding. The more you practice it consistently, the more trust and closeness rebuild naturally. You must also rebuild rituals of connection. These aren't grand gestures. They are small, meaningful habits that create emotional stability. It could be a 10-minute check-in at the end of the day, a weekly walk without phones, or even a shared laugh over something simple. The point is consistency. Emotional intimacy thrives on repeated reinforcement. When you show up for these moments, you signal care, attention, and commitment. Over time, these small rituals repair gaps that have widened over months or years. And then there's the act of appreciation. People often assume love is self-evident, but connection suffers when gratitude and acknowledgement are missing. Regularly express appreciation for the small things your partner does, for their presence, for who they are. Let them know they are seen, valued, and cherished. This doesn't mean flattery, it means sincere acknowledgement. Appreciation acts like emotional oxygen. It nourishes the bond, strengthens trust, and counteracts the slow erosion caused by neglect. Now consider repair after conflict. Emotional intimacy isn't about never having disagreements. It's about how you handle them. Avoidance of conflict can be as damaging as conflict itself. When arguments arise, resist the urge to shut down or escape. Instead, listen actively, validate feelings, and seek understanding before being understood. Apologize where necessary, forgive where possible, and rebuild trust deliberately. Each resolved conflict is an opportunity to deepen emotional connection rather than weaken it. Another critical aspect is aligning expectations and boundaries. Many relationships fail emotionally because unspoken expectations go unmet. You might expect your partner to notice your emotional needs without communicating them. They might expect the same from you. Clarify what you both need and establish boundaries that protect the relationship's emotional health. Boundaries aren't walls, they are bridges. They allow each person to feel safe, understood, and capable of giving their best emotional energy. Consistency is the ultimate protector of emotional intimacy. One act of attentiveness is not enough. Sporadic effort cannot counteract months of neglect. Emotional closeness requires daily commitment. Check in, listen, express, share, and nurture your partner emotionally every day. And don't wait for them to initiate it first. Take responsibility for the connection. Relationships flourish when both partners actively choose to invest emotionally, but one consistent, caring effort can be enough to inspire the other to follow. Physical intimacy will naturally follow when emotional connection is restored. You may have experienced the dissonance being physically close but emotionally distant. The gap makes touch feel mechanical, love feel incomplete. But when you rebuild trust, vulnerability, and presence, the physical side becomes an authentic reflection of the emotional bond. It's no longer a replacement for closeness, it is the natural expression of it. The stronger the emotional intimacy, the more fulfilling the physical connection becomes. You also need to address old patterns of neglect directly. Reflect on past mistakes without guilt that immobilizes you. Identify moments where emotional needs were unmet. Apologize sincerely and commit to doing better. This isn't just about saying the right words, it's about demonstrating consistent change over time. Actions speak louder than intentions. Your partner needs to feel that the effort is real, sustained, and purposeful. Only then can the emotional bond heal fully and resist future erosion. And here's the subtle but powerful truth. Restoring emotional intimacy is not about perfection, it's about attention and persistence. There will be setbacks, misunderstandings, and moments when old patterns try to resurface. That's normal. What matters is that you notice them, address them, and recommit. Emotional failure only becomes permanent when ignored. The difference between a relationship that thrives and one that collapses is the willingness to act consistently, courageously, and consciously over the long term. Now imagine the transformation. Conversations are deep, fulfilling, and alive. Laughter returns naturally, not forced. Conflicts are handled constructively, trust is rebuilt, and the bond grows stronger each. Physical closeness is a natural outcome, not a substitute for emotional disconnection. You feel seen, understood, and valued, and so does your partner. Emotional intimacy becomes the foundation for everything else in your relationship. Resilience, passion, security, and love. Take a moment and picture yourself in that reality. Feel the difference it makes when you actively nurture emotional connection every day. No more drifting, no more silent distance, no more wondering if love is fading. You know the warning signs, you understand the patterns, and you've committed to reversing them. You are fully present, consistently vulnerable, appreciative, and attentive. You have taken control of your emotional life, and with it, the health of your relationship. The final truth is this: emotional failure is preventable. Physical failure is often the visible result of emotional neglect, but you have the power to stop it before it manifests. Relationships are not doomed by circumstances. They are shaped by the choices you make, moment by moment, in how you invest emotionally. By staying aware, practicing presence, nurturing vulnerability, repairing neglect, and maintaining consistent attention, you can create a bond that is unshakable, fulfilling, and lasting. So from this moment forward, commit to being intentional about connection. Watch for the signs, address the patterns, and prioritize emotional intimacy above all else. Because when emotional closeness thrives, love not only survives, it flourishes. You will never look at relationships the same way again. You will understand that lasting love is built on invisible, daily choices, and that every act of attention, empathy, and presence is an investment in the foundation that holds everything else together. And when you act on this knowledge, your relationship will no longer be at risk of failing silently. It will grow resilient, passionate, and deeply fulfilling. You have the power to stop emotional failure before it ever reaches the physical realm, and in doing so, you create the kind of love that lasts a lifetime.